All right. Hello, everybody. We're back.
With it.
Coffee. Oh, were we filming that whole time? No. Okay. All right. Hey, Erica.
Hey, Laura.
So, things are a little crazy right now. We were just talking about the stock market. Believe it or not, we do talk about things like the stock market.
We're learning.
We're learning. And that's what kind of brought me to want to talk about this. We are going to honor seasonal affective disorder by learning all about the Great Depression. We will start in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve System.
Dang.
What? This was the department created to oversee the economy by monitoring the fluctuations in the stock market and controlling the interest rates according to supply and demand consumerism. So this is when we noticed we needed a department to pay attention to the economy. 1913. Before that, we were kind of, I guess, flying by the seat of our pants. Okay, so that's when the Federal Reserve System starts. In 1914, World War I began. The United States remained neutral for the first part of the war, and by supplying goods like food, household necessities to the warring countries, the U.S. economy boomed. It went crazy. We were so rich. So rich. Yeah.
Is that when they started inventing like drugs and things? Like party drugs? Was 1914?
I don't know.
I bet we should look into it. Just saying.
I mean, they always had Coke, I guess. Like what party drugs?
Like, I was thinking cocaine.
Oh, yeah. No. They've been doing Coke for, like, that's your normal people did Coke. Like,
I mean,
that was a
wasn't it
normal
in
drug to do.
Coca-Cola?
It was in Coca-Cola. That's how much people did it. And I'm sure at this time they were doing it.
I want to.
You want to do a deep dive on cocaine? Is that going to be one of
Let's
these?
find the original Coca-Cola recipe minus the special ingredient, whatever that's in the vault, and make it how they used to make it.
That sounds like a
Yeah.
lot of work for you. Enjoy.
No. Okay.
All right, so we're rich. In 1918, World War I ended, and that caused the market to take a short dip. But by 1920, U.S. factories and farms had fully recovered from not supplying other countries during the wartime, okay? And they began making a profit again. So we dipped after the war because we were so used to shipping goods out of the country.
Yeah. And
All right.
everything stopped during...
Everything stopped, so now we're not manufacturing like we were. So, of course, things dip, but we recover pretty quick. And by 1920, we're starting to make a profit again. Like, it's good. At this point, every nation was competing to revive their economy because of the war. This encouraged our local and worldwide economies to become more and more reliant upon credit to purchase big ticket items such as cars and large appliances. So before this, we didn't use credit as much. This is when credit just kind of becomes as good as cash. And more people are getting it now, okay?
How old were you when you got your first credit card?
I was 40. I was 40. I waited. I knew me. I knew me. I did not want to be in debt.
You were lately.
I would rather be poor and do exactly get shit paid than go into debt.
I was a baby, but they only gave me like $200, so I couldn't really get into debt even if I tried.
I was 40, and I think they only gave me like $200. Like I had no credit.
That's the starter credit line, and I was like 18, 19.
Yeah, good for you. You've kept yours up too.
I did. Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. I did good. My mama taught me well. You know, don't ever owe no one no money. Never. Shout out.
All right.
My bad.
So, that's okay. We're using credit. The new and sudden influx of consumerism created vast amounts of wealth for business owners around the world. So, everybody's using credit. We're all buying stuff. Now, you can more stuff is being manufactured, and it's more accessible to everyone. So people are getting real wealthy, especially in the United States. This also made them very vulnerable to any downturns in the market. So they're relying on credit. So if something bad happens, there's no cash. It's all credit. But the roaring 20s were roaring, and it was a chance to get rich. It was a time when one all had to do was make the right investment and become a wealthy man literally overnight. These were the days of the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and Henry Ford. So this is when millionaires were newish to the United States, and wild times. It was also a time for scam artists and con men to prey on the hopes of ordinary Americans. People were scammed into buying Florida swampland, non-existent oil deposits, and one of the most infamous schemes of all time, the Ponzi. Con man Charles Ponzi convinced his clients to give him money so he could purchase Spanish mail coupons and redeem them for U.S. stamps and profit off the weakness of the Spanish mail coupon. So the U.S. dollar was higher than the Spanish dollar. So you buy stuff over there, sell it here, you make your profit. This is what he's telling everybody, all right? So they start giving him money to do this. He took investments from anyone and everyone, convincing them this would make them all rich. At first, he was able to make good by paying off one investor with the money from a new investor. And the more investors he got, the more people he had to pay until he owed more investors than he could afford. Creating a pyramid where he's on, he's got all these people that have invested in him and he can't cover them all.
I would have fallen for it. He would have had me.
It's terrifying. And this is a time where people are just feeling lucky. Like they're watching other people make crazy amounts of money, so they want to trust this dude. Eventually, a reporter would write a story about the scam and the authorities would look into the dealings. Ponzi was unable to pay back his investors and he would be charged with using the mail to commit fraud. He was sent to prison for 5 years.
Only
5 years
for
and
scamming,
mail fraud.
For scamming, thousands, I'm sure, of families and investors.
Out of all their money and couldn't give it back.
5 years, that's it.
But at this time, the riskiest and probably still is get-rich-quick scheme took place on Wall Street. The stock market can be traced back to Dutch merchants who asked for investors in their ventures. And then the investors would get a financial interest in the success of their travels. This allowed the merchants to sail further because they had more financial backing. They could stop and refuel along the way and trade more, and everyone would profit. They could bring back way more money. Eventually, societies would invest in infrastructure with construction of roads, buildings, and other public structures. All of those that invested would have a share in the taxes raised by the use of those structures. Large and small businesses would sell stocks in their companies, allowing them to expand and innovate. If a stock was doing really well, the investor could sell the stock for more money than they paid for it and make a quick buck, or they could trade for more shares in a less expensive stock, or they could hold on to it and rely on the stock to withstand the fluctuations in the market. Okay? So, started way back with Dutch merchants asking for investors. That's where the stock market is believed to have started.
Okay.
All
and
right.
that was 19...
It doesn't even, it's way back.
A long time ago.
All right. Blah, blah, blah. And it has developed into what it is today. And in the 1920s, it was freaking fire. That's when there was a lot of party drugs. I guarantee it.
Leo. Leo DiCaprio throwing some parties.
The Great Gatsby.
I wouldn't get invited. I know it. They'd have me in the kitchen.
Yeah, I would be bartending. I might be bartending.
I would be doing guacamole table side.
Oh, they would pay for that back then too. Yeah. So the investor in the stock market could use his stocks as collateral for credit. So if you hold on to your stocks, just because you don't have cash in hand, you know this. You don't have cash in hand, but you're still wealthy because in the stock market, you can take out credit basically on the stock.
Borrow against the stock you have.
Sure.
Okay.
So that's where the stock market developed to. All right. So the investor could use his stocks as collateral for credit and live a life of wealth on his investments. By 1929, so the Roaring Twenties is a really, really good time. By 1929, investors were buying stocks for as little as 10% down on the price of the stock and then borrowing against that stock as collateral to cover the other 90%.
So doubling down.
Almost 100%ing down. I know. Yeah. I mean, it's wild. They only had to put 10% down. So if you wanted to buy a stock of something today, you could just put 10% down and then use the knowledge is, I guess, how they predicted this, of predicting that stock would be worth enough soon to pay back what you owed and you would make your money.
Okay, yeah, that's crazy. That sounds like
10% down.
Idea.
Right. Okay. Remember, we have a Federal Reserve that's supposed to be watching all this, but everybody's making money. They've never seen anything like this before. All right. In an effort to restore their economies, other countries became fierce competition by lowering their prices and also accepting credit for goods. This was concerning to the U.S. economists. So in early 1929, Congress, under the presidency of Herbert Hoover.
Hoover! He did good, girl. He did good.
No, he didn't. I think you should listen to this story. This was concerning to the U.S. economists. So in early 1929, Congress, under the presidency of Herbert Hoover, introduced the Smoot-Hawley Act. This act was created in an effort to combat outside competitors by raising U.S. tariffs by 16%. The act was approved, but was not yet signed into law. Okay? So that means they see all this, that Americans are buying stuff from overseas. Okay? So in order to stop that, they have to add a tariff, which is something that's very big in the news right now, to make those goods that are being imported in more expensive so that people will buy locally. Okay? Like that's the idea. But they haven't put it into effect yet. And the economy's freaking real good. So at the moment, they have time to really think about it and figure it out. All right? So it's not a law yet, though. Just being discussed.
Works.
Yes. Between 1921 and 1929, so we're in 1929, but we'll start in 21. There was a 67% increase in the money supply. This led to declining interest rates, which encouraged people to borrow and overinvest. So like we said, everybody put everything on credit with just this idea that everything would be okay and they could pay it off just fine. All right. Banks were lending. Everybody was lending like crazy. The economy was booming and running unchecked. A bubble had formed over the stock market. The amount of credit used, the unlimited amount of money being printed, and foreign countries selling products for lower prices caused the dollar to lose value. So now you've got all this credit in the stock market, and now the dollar's not worth what it was.
Yeah.
It's not what it was. The overinvestment and money being printed should have led to rising interest rates to prevent the bubble. But the Federal Reserve, who's supposed to be watching, was new and had never seen an economy so robust. And unfortunately, their concern came too late. So by the time they realized what was actually happening, we were already there.
Yeah.
So on October 28th, 1929, the prosperity had peaked. The bubble had burst, and the Dow Jones dropped nearly 13% in one day. And remember, everybody's on credit. Everyone has invested in this. And do you know what the Dow Jones is?
The stock market.
Correct. But what's okay?
The thing that checks.
So the Dow Jones is an index. So it's like not a guide. There's a different word. Anyhow, it's a way to measure the stock market, and they do this by taking the like top 4 best companies on the stock market. Whoever's doing the fucking best, the top 4, all right, and they watch them. And once those start dropping, that means it's not been going well for long enough for it to catch up to those. So that's the index. If those are prospering and everything's prospering, they kind of just measured off the top 4. Okay?
Got it.
And now everything's on credit, and people are just spending money like hiring you to make guacamole tableside, like for all their friends.
Yeah.
For no reason.
Spending
Total
money.
heck yes. Like great Gatsby days. All right. La 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 la. So Dow Jones dropped nearly 13% in one day, which freaked a lot of people out. The Federal Reserve halted the vast supply of money available in an effort to slow the market. But this only caused the market to fall even faster and even quicker. So you get, like, they were printing 67% higher amounts of money was being printed, totally made the dollar worth nothing. And then they just stopped printing. As soon as they saw that happen, instead of like kind of working on, they stopped.
Like
which
just cold turkey.
Cold turkey. All right, so that was October 28th, 1929, 13%. On October 29th, 1929, next day, 16 million stocks were sold or worthless, wiping out the stock market. The freaking next day. The day would forever be known as Black Tuesday. In a panic, people began withdrawing their money from the banks because now you want your cash. Whatever you have, you want. And
Total chaos.
Unfortunately, the banks could not refund all the money as high percentages of cash had been used to cover credit and loans, which were now completely lost. So they were just gambling on this stock market. Nobody had cash. Everything was in IOUs. And whatever they could pay back, they had to. So people did not get their money back because that's how banks work. Ah, la la la. Fortunes were completely erased overnight. Millionaires were reduced to selling apples for 5 cents on street corners. Freaking crazy, right? Families lost their homes when they could no longer pay the mortgage. Bread lines were found in every metropolitan city. Do you know what bread line is?
Like the feeding places.
Right, like soup kitchens.
There we go, yeah.
And everyone was there. Like, people just didn't have anything. So it was not just, unfortunately, maybe like the less fortunate in our society we see at soup kitchens. This would have been
everybody.
We would have been there. And that was every metropolitan city. Every major city in the United States had a friggin' bread line. In 1930, so this happened in October 29th. In 1930, President Herbert Hoover would sign the Smoot-Hawley Act into law. Do you remember what that was?
You did tell. Oh, yeah. The tariffs. Okay.
All right. So after the stock market crashes and there's already bread lines forming, Herbert Hoover signs the Smoot-Hawley Act into law in an effort to boost the local economy. But the tariffs just caused more inflation. So instead of people being able to transition and buy locally, which is what it was supposed to be, people didn't even have any money to buy.
Yeah, we were already broke.
Too late. And then to add a tax on top of it, we can't get cheap goods now. Now we have to rely on our local people who have to pay money to make these things crazy, okay?
Could we have a repeat?
We might be about to find out.
Yes, we are.
So he signs that law into effect, and it just causes even more inflation. Now people really can't afford anything. And shanty towns popped up in and around the large cities.
Shanty towns are tent towns.
Basically.
Yep.
Or they would take like sheet metal and cardboard. It was crazy, these little homes that they built. And it's full towns, not just like in the park, a few tents. It's towns. It's wild. Shanty towns popped up in and around the large cities. The homeless inhabitants had nowhere to go, and as a dig to Hoover's constant claim that prosperity was just around the corner, they called the shanty towns Hoovervilles.
Oh.
They used old newspapers as blankets, calling them Hoover blankets. So there was no welfare at the time. There's no help from the government, period. This happens, and all Hoover can do is tell them it's prosperity is around the corner. That's all they keep hearing. In rural America, a drought had already begun to plague farmers. And by 1930, the Dust Bowl had begun. Do you know what that is?
No.
So it'd be like Texas and Oklahoma and like the flat states where they grow stuff. You know, I don't know exactly which states were the worst hit by this. Due to over farming and poor land management, large swaths of land were reduced to dusty wastelands. So combine that with massive winds, and the rural residents endured poverty and massive blackout dust storms. And so now the farmers have no money. Boop, nobody's buying groceries from them. You know, not that they've really been able to do it because they've been in a drought. Their land has become dirt, just dust basically. And just so happens at this time, this crazy wind comes through. Like
everything up.
They literally have just blackouts of dust for like days. Imagine.
Yikes.
No food, living in a dusty wasteland. Fucking horrifying.
Yeah, that sounds nightmarish.
Yeah. So that's what's happening in rural America. In cities, there's shanty towns and bread lines and all this kind of stuff. By 1931, 21,000 Americans had committed suicide. This happened, pour a little out.
Dang. R.I.P. to those individuals.
If you were lucky enough to have money, you could buy a new home for $3,000.
That's also a shocker.
A man's suit cost $10. A shirt could be purchased for a nickel. Milk was 10 cents. And a loaf of bread was 5 cents. And still most people could not afford it.
Ugh. That hurts. I'm like, gonna talk about the good old days, but it's not. It's not.
By 1932, public companies had lost 89% of their value. Who can really come back from that?
Yeah.
They could no longer afford to pay their employees, and those lucky enough to keep a job were paid a fraction of their previous wages.
Man.
Several companies
are desperate, and they'll do it.
Well, and that's the company's not making any money either.
Right.
So this is like all I can afford to pay you, unless there's some real pieces of shit out there that really profited off this, but which we might be about to see again too.
We'll see.
They could no longer afford to pay their employees, and those lucky enough to keep a job were paid a fraction of the previous wages. Several companies closed for good. Agriculture prices dropped to the lowest price since the Civil War. Do you know when the Civil War was?
Let's see. Let me look at my chart here.
That's not up there.
Damn it. I don't know.
So but you know there was a Civil War between the North states and the South states over slavery. The market's so bad, it's like we might as well be in a war-torn country. Freaking wild. Mothers filled bottles with pork fat to nourish their babies due to the lack of milk.
I mean, I feel like it could taste good, but I don't know. That's sad.
I don't know how.
I mean, tamales be having lard in it, and it's good.
Imagine the baby, though. You have to feed that to every day. That can't be good for its arteries.
Oh
Oh
no,
my goodness.
that does suck.
Yeah. And by 1933,
I bet you those are all the individuals who are living to 100. You know.
you're probably not wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
By 1933, 25.6% of Americans were unemployed, compared to 2020, when only 14% of Americans were unemployed. And lucky for us, we had government assistance.
Yeah.
These people have nothing.
Yeah, that's.
The Great Depression was and still is the worst economic downturn. It's not easy.
Reading is hard.
Reading is hard in American history. So this is the worst we've ever seen, worst we've ever had since. The United States had undergone low points before and after, but never as low and for as long. People were feeling hopeless, desperate, and forgotten. Franklin Roosevelt was voted in as president in 1933, and he wasted no time in his attempts to correct the dire situation.
I was thinking Roosevelt was Hoover, Hoover was Roosevelt, so Roosevelt.
He's the man.
He's the dude.
He's the man.
guy that
He
got
comes
us
in
together.
after this shit happens.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, cheers to Roosevelt. Mm-hmm.
I'll take a little sip of the cafe.
He did good. He did real good.
On March 9th, 1933, Roosevelt enacted the New Deal. In the first 3 months of the New Deal, 8.5 million people would go back to work.
Hell yeah.
That's wild.
Mm-hmm. You
3
did it.
months. The New Deal developed government-funded programs to create temporary jobs through infrastructure projects. These projects produced 650,000 miles of road, 125,000 public buildings, 75,000 bridges, and 8,000 parks, all built because of this New Deal.
Wonderful man, Mr. President Roosevelt.
The Works Progress Administration was created to provide employment to artists. So even they put artists back to work.
Nice.
Painters and sculptors were hired to create art pieces for government buildings. Writers and photographers were hired to record history. The U.S. Treasury was issuing money for these programs, but it was hardly enough to pay a high wage. However, it did provide a little stability, and it helped to rebuild trust in our systems. All right? So that's where we're at. We just went through this fucking devastation.
There's hope. There's hope now.
Mm-hmm. Although we're getting rid of these things now. All right. So the National Recovery Administration was created to help shape trade practices, like I said. They created the Codes of Fair Competition, which set minimum wages, maximum hours, and price control. So we didn't even have a minimum wage before any of this. But the stock market was being protected by regulating the nation's financial hierarchy and by insuring banks. Cash subsidies were given to farmers for the production of staple crops: corn, wheat, rice, cotton, tobacco, hogs, and milk.
So they were given a little extra to
grow
specific.
These.
Okay.
These specific things will pay you to grow.
But
People
we need you.
We need this.
We need you.
Right. All right. So they get paid to grow the essential crops. People began putting their money back in the banks.
Trust. There's just again like that.
Social Security was created to provide an income for Americans 65 and over based on their lifetime payroll tax contributions. So they looked back at what that person had made before the Great Depression and then created a program that would pay them because they couldn't go back to work.
Good times.
Well, they never had a Social Security before that. And I think we're going to cut that too.
Don't see.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see.
Aid to families with dependent children was created, which offered financial support for families with children who lost their father due to death, absence, or inability to work.
Only the father.
Yeah. You don't even, if mom dies, that's okay. Dad can still go to work.
You don't get shit.
Nope. The New Deal even provided electricity across 7 U.S. states. The program had accomplished its goals: relief, recovery, and reform. As the economy stabilized, the Roosevelt administration needed to raise taxes for the reserves, so the Fed stopped issuing money. It was too soon. And in 1937, the stock market would plummet by 50%.
Ooh.
Can you imagine how scary that was?
Yeah.
Interest rates skyrocketed, and the United States was in a recession for 2 years. So it just plateaued after that, like broke again. But, semi able to get by, but freaking poor. In 1939, Hitler invades Poland, and World War II begins. The United States was a neutral observer, and Roosevelt used this opportunity to sell weapons to our allies. So we didn't fight, we didn't send troops, we didn't get involved in that way, but we made weapons and sold them.
Made made lemonade out of lemons.
The
Wait, how does it go?
Yeah, that's it. The U.S. weapons and manufacturing business boomed. The economy roared back, and it was the end of the Great Depression.
Thank God.
However, in 1941, Japan would attack Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and the United States would enter the war. The financial situation became precarious again as citizens rationed at home to ensure that the troops could afford to get what they needed overseas. In 1945, Hitler was defeated, World War II ended, and the United States would emerge with the strongest economy in the world.
It's a comeback story.
So that's the Great Depression, friend.
Wow. That was very educational. Thank you,
Yeah,
Miss
you're welcome.
Lerna
Do you feel like
Lesson.
it makes sense?
Yeah, it feels like history is repeating itself in some ways. And I'm not excited to see what happens, but we're going to find out together.
Yeah, for real. And we're going to find out with you guys, too. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Bye.
Below.